let's see what we have. I really like using the dahlias. You see here we have sort of two different shapes, and let's see what they look like. Hello and welcome to another episode of the iPad Lettering Show. My name is Karen. I am from iPad Lettering, bringing you the best tips and tricks about anything iPad related. In today's episode, I'm going to show you how you can create this beautiful full florals wreath using my brand new set of Procreate brushes. The brushes that I'm about to show you have been created in collaboration with Stephanie Fehrenbach and also Becca from the Happy Ever Crafter. You can find them in the description of this video. Alright, so now let's get started. And I will show you what the brush set contains and then also how we can create this beautiful wreath. Let's start by creating a new canvas. I'm using one of my watercolor templates for this. It's not necessary to use the watercolor template. I like using it because it's got the watercolor background, which creates a nice texture and also creates a little bit more saturation in my colors. If you would like to get the template, I'll put a link in the description of this video, or if you have my Watercolor Advanced brush set, then you would have this template already. Alright, so now let's look at the brushes that are included in the full floral set. So I'm just going to choose my IPL full florals brush set, and here are all the brushes. In the previous sets that I've created with Stephanie, we usually had around 20 to 24 different florals, but for this brush set we've actually included 30 different floral brushes, and Stephanie's been very busy painting, so I thought why not create brushes from all those beautiful florals that she has painted. Now let's get started with our wreath, and in order to do that we'll create a new layer. So we've got a new layer, and then I'm just going to create a circle first that helps to guide us and just to make sure that the wreath is going to be reasonably round. For this you can use any brush really, any monoline brush is fine. I'm using my totally crispy brush here, but it's totally not necessary. Any brush really is fine. All we want to do here is create a quick shape circle. So to do that, we can create a random circle and then hold down your Apple Pencil until the circle snaps into place. And then you'll see here there's an edit shape menu popping up at the top. So we tap on that and then tap circle. So now we have got a circle just like that. All right, and then we'll select the arrow key here to get rid of that selection. And now we want to arrange the circle on the page a little bit better, just to make it sort of nice and centered. And also make sure that you leave a little bit of space around your circle, because some of the leaves are going to pop outside the circle, and so we just want to give ourselves a little bit of room to work with. So now this circle is quite thick, so what you can do if you don't want it to be this thick, you can just decrease the opacity a little bit. So this is just something we need as a little guide. It doesn't need to be super black, so this is probably good. And then also make sure you select a new layer to create your floral. So every time we add a new flower or any leaves or branches or anything we're going to add, we're going to start with a new layer. All right, so now I'm also going to change my color. I've created a full palette here. This is not necessary. Again, I like creating palettes. If you're interested in learning how to create a palette, you can either check out my rainbow tutorial that I made, or of course if you have followed along with Show Me Your Florals with the basic course, you would already know how to make this. Again, I will put links to those videos in the description of this video as well. Alright, so let's start with a dark green color, and let's select our full florals brushes. And for this one I like using the Burning Bush 2 brush, and this is what it looks like. So you can see it's creating a nice little shape here. And now what we do is we arrange those leaves along the circle to create a wreath. So select the arrow tool to select your leaves and then arrange them along the lines of the circle. So now you see here how the end pops out a little bit. So what we can do now is select the warp tool, and then you can bend the brush along the circle and align it nicely like this. So now this looks good. And then you might or might not like to keep the end here of the leaves. I'm going to erase it. To erase parts of your leaves, I recommend you use the soft airbrush because it doesn't create harsh edges, so you can just softly erase what you don't want. Okay, so this looks good. So now we're going to repeat the same thing along the remainder of our circle. Make sure you create a new layer every time you create your stamp like this, so that we can move the leaves around individually and then place them on the wreath like this. So you can also resize it a little bit if it maybe is not quite big enough, but this looks pretty good to me. And then we do the warp again, just to adjust it ever so slightly, like this. And then I'm gonna erase the end here a little bit. Okay, and then a new layer, and we have more leaves here. All right, and again select the warp tool and then adjust your brush like this. So now I'm going to speed up the video and finish the wreath, and then once I finish that, I'll show you how we can add florals to our wreath. So now the base of our wreath is complete, and you can see what's really nice about this is that the brushes are not all the exact same size, so that gives it a nice organic look, and it doesn't feel like you've just used the same brush stamp over and over. So like this one here, I'm going to adjust this a little bit, and again you'll notice the benefit of using the different layers is because you can go in now and you can individually adjust the parts of your wreath like this, which is quite helpful. So now I'm just going to push this a little bit further along to sort of make it match with my other leaves here ever so slightly, and I think it looks quite good now. So I quite like this, and now what we're going to do is we group these layers like this. We'll group them, create a new layer. So now what you can do is you can flatten this layer, but if you think that you might want to go in later and maybe adjust your leaves again, you can leave this group, duplicate it, and then flatten this group here and turn the bottom layer off. Now you would have also noticed that duplicating the layers intensified the colors of your leaves. So if you like this look, definitely feel free to duplicate the layer if you like it. But I prefer the slightly paler look because I'll show you at the end how we can intensify the colors a little bit anyway. So for now, I think this looks really good. All right, so now let's add some florals as well. And let's see what we have. I really like using the dahlias. You see here we have sort of two different shapes. And let's see what they look like. Now for this one, I'm going to use a dark red color. So now I'll just place dahlias here sort of on the edges of where the leaves meet, so we can hide those and fill the gap a little bit. So I'll create some different ones here, and then I'll put one here as well. And just to even things out, I recommend that you don't sort of put them evenly, but maybe space them out a little bit differently. And I also, let's create a new layer and let's make some other dahlias. Let's use the second shape and see what that looks like. So I'm just going to place some more around the wreath here. Put one there, and we'll put one here, maybe there. That looks quite nice. And so now I feel like this is a bit overlapping too much, so we can move this. So we'll highlight this. This is the selection tool here. And then we use the arrow tool and we can move this a little bit further out. You can also turn it around if you don't want them to be all aligned the same way. That can look nicely too. All right, And then we are also going to add some roses. Again, choose a new layer. And then for the roses, I think I'm going to make them sort of a slightly different red. And I will choose the rose. So now to start with, I'm going to put the rose here in the middle. And the reason why I'm doing that is because I want to show you what it looks like. So this is quite pale. This rose is a lot paler than the dahlias. So what we can do to intensify this, we can duplicate the layer. And you can see how this creates a bit more contrast between the light and the dark part of your rose. So if we merge these two layers, then we have a rose that kind of matches what the other florals look like. So now you also see that the rose has little leaves here already. So you might like to keep them, or you might like to remove them. I like to keep the little leaves for now, but the stem here I don't like so much. So let's erase this. And it's easier to do it here before you place it on the wreath because it's easier to see. So we just erase this, and you see, because I've been using the soft airbrush again, that it creates kind of a smooth edge. So this blends in nicely with the rest of your composition. All right, and then the leaves, we want to make them green rather than red. So now let's lock the alpha channel of this layer. Tap on the layer thumbnail and then select alpha lock. And what that means is that you can paint on top of your color pixels without affecting the background. And then with green, we'll paint the leaves. Now for this, I also recommend using one of the soft airbrushes. So this one's the soft brush. And now I'm just gonna color this in green. And depending on the setting of the brush, you might have to do a few layers. You'll see here that the opacity is not set to 100%. This one's set to 60%, which means it doesn't cover your flowers, or sorry, your leaves the first time around. So you might do a few different layers on top until you've got the saturation and the color that you like. Right, so you don't have to do it now, but again, I find this easier than placing it on the wreath because you can see it a little bit better here. Also here you can see where the colors merge into each other. So this is where it's nice that your brush is not 100% opaque because it blends in nicely with the red from the rose. And same here, so this is still part of the leaf. And the watercolors here, they would sort of flow into each other. So this is how we can simulate this. All right, now let's maybe choose a different green as well to give it a bit more interest. So just a little bit lighter maybe here in certain parts. Again, of course, it's completely up to you how you would like to do that. But now I like the rose, so I will place it now on my wreath. And I think it would look nice here. So just turn it around until you sort of find a nice place for it. Also, you can slightly resize it if you like to. Now, don't worry about the leaves that are underneath the rose. I'll show you how we can get rid of those in a second. Let's just put the rose here. I think that looks nice, and I think it would be really nice if we had another rose. So now, because we've put all the effort in of making this rose nice and beautiful, let's just duplicate the layer and then grab it and then place it maybe here. And in this case, I really recommend that you turn it around so it doesn't look like it's exactly the same. But you can see by just turning around this rose, it looks quite different. And no one can even tell that they are the same. So this looks nice. You could also find some other places where you might want to put more roses, but I think this looks pretty good the way it is right now. So yeah, so I think I quite like this. Now we don't need our circle anymore, so I'm going to hide the layer. You can just hide it, and you can see now, you can still see the wreath, which is nice. And then maybe what you might like to consider now is rearranging some of the dahlias. I feel like this one here, for some reason, I think it needs to be moved a little bit further this way, ever so slightly. And now I think it looks good. So now the next step is to remove some of the leaves that are underneath the flowers to make them come through a little bit nicer. And so the way to do that is to select your layer with the wreath like that, and then use the soft brush again to erase the leaves that are underneath the flowers. So now one of the decisions you might like to make is whether or not the leaves pop through where there is the white space underneath your flowers. So you might choose to leave them, but in my case I actually prefer if they're all gone, and I actually quite like if the white comes through, even though it's probably not natural. Now naturally you would have this leaf here come through, but I quite like the white space. So I'm just going to erase the leaves everywhere and not leave them here, and you can see now how the rose really pops out, and it's not really noticeable that there is no continuation of the leaves here. So I think this actually looks quite nice. And now on the edge, what's nice about doing this and using this brush here is that you can leave a little bit of your green at the edge of the flower, and then you can see that creates sort of a darker edge, and that actually looks quite nice. And that creates that watercolor look that we love so much. So you don't have to be too precise. You can leave the edge a little bit, and it doesn't matter too much. It kind of enhances the look, so I don't mind this at all. And then now we're just going to go around, and we are going to erase the leaves that we don't need. So this is going to take a little while, and you know, you might think this might be a little bit tedious, but I actually find this quite therapeutic. Sometimes I like doing this if I, you know, just don't feel very creative, or I just feel like I want to do something, but I don't have any ideas. Then this type of activity is really mine. It's like, you know, coloring in a coloring book. It's that type of activity which might feel boring, but it's actually really nice and therapeutic. And now you see here we've got the rose, and it's clear, and if we just zoom out, you can see how this blends in really nicely with the rest of our composition. So now I'm going to do this for the whole rest of the wreath, and I'm going to speed up the video, and then once I've done this, I'll show you the next steps. And here is our finished wreath. This looks quite nice already, but let me show you some additional tricks you might like to learn as well. So the first one is the colors. So obviously these are fall colors and I quite like them, but you might like to change things up a little bit. And the easiest thing to do that is select one of the layers, and you can see we still got all our layers intact, which is crucial for this step. So the leaves that are this nice green, so what we can do now is select our hue, saturation and brightness sliders and see what happens if we change the hue of the green. So you might like it a little bit more towards the yellow, or a little bit more towards blue, so you can certainly do that and see what that looks like. Maybe increase the saturation a little bit, make it darker or lighter, whichever way you prefer. And so this is certainly an option. You can do the same thing for the flowers. So let's see what that looks like for the dahlias. If we, you know, maybe you don't want them red, maybe you would like them more pink or purple, or even sort of in the blue shades. That could look nice as well. And this looks quite nice. Let's see what else we can do here. Okay, and then I like the orange, so I'm going to leave that, but let's see what we can do with the roses. The roses are going to be a little bit more difficult. Let me merge these two layers so we can change them at the same time, because they also have the green leaves on them. So this one you might be a little bit more careful. Or what you could do with this one, instead of using the hue, saturation and brightness sliders, you could use the color balance, because this will allow you to only change one of the colors. So here you can see we've got highlights, midtones and shadows. Usually I start with the highlights and then I move the sliders to see how the colors change. And you can see now we've got a little bit more saturated red color, which I think makes the roses pop a little bit more. And then here you can see what adjusting these values will do to your roses. And then let's see the midtones. If you want to make them pop a little bit more, then you could do that. But you can see now how the leaves turn red as well. So that's not what we want. So we'll leave that. And then here as well. So this midtones mostly changes the leaves, which is not what we want. So I think the roses look pretty good like this. So we can leave them. I'm just going to remove our sliders there. All right, so now another thing I really like to do is adding a little bit more contrast, adding some more shadows and possibly also highlights. But let's start with the shadows. And the easiest way to do that is to create the new layer and then change the blend mode to overlay. And then choose black. And so all that does, so we can just choose black and use the soft brush again. Will make the pixels just darker, but it won't affect any of the light pixels. So now, for example, I want to add a little bit more depth to the centers of my dahlias. You can see now how that just ever so slightly pops out a little bit more. It's probably more visible in the orange, so this becomes a bit more red now, which looks very nice. It's only very subtle, but I think it makes quite a big difference. You'll notice in the leaves as well. So what you want to do now, instead of the edges of the leaves, you can kind of burn them in a little bit to create even more of that watercolor look that we like so much. So just go around the edges ever so slightly. Make sure that your brush is not too big. So this one's now set at maybe 3 or 4%, and then my opacity is still at 60%. So that's probably quite a good setting for this. So now we can go around and just add those shadows to our leaves. You don't want to go overboard with this. It's only really a subtle change which will make all the difference. And if you want to see really the difference it makes, what you can do is turn the layer off. So now you can see how this is a lot flatter, and now this creates that nice depth that we like looking at. All right, so now let's just go all the way around. You can also add a little bit more to your flowers as well if you like. But at this stage, I think the leaves will look very good like this. And then of course you can add some text to your wreath as well if you'd like to, or you can add maybe some little flowers as well in the gaps there. But this is the basic concept of how to create a beautiful floral wreath using the brand new full floral brushes. Thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you in the next video.